Let's look at our last type of numbering system for the teeth. We call this the anatomic numbering system. And I will say this is probably the least utilized out of the systems we've talked about. Triadin is what you see most commonly, but it is something that they sometimes still ask about in the VT&E, or you'll see in your books. So this anatomic numbering system we need to know for that reason. So first of all, remember that we've got 4 quadrants in the mouth. You already knew that. And we have up here our upper right, upper left, and lower left, and lower right. And that's assuming the patient is facing me with its mouth, oh, that's not a very good circle, wide open, okay, and ready to go. So let's say I was interested in labeling the upper right canine. I would use the letter C for canine, and if it's an adult canine, it would be a capital C. And since it's in the upper right quadrant of the mouth, I would put the number 1 here. Since there's only one canine and it's in the upper right, it's going to be over here. Let's say I was labeling the canine tooth on this side. Let's make these triangles just to be consistent. Okay, again, if it's an adult canine, it would be a capital letter C. And in this case, since it's in the upper left, I would put it in the upper left corner. Lower left, let's say I was interested in labeling that canine. Do you guys see where this is going yet? I bet you do. So lower left, capital C for an adult canine, and then a 1. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Now let's say we were labeling incisors. So I've got my 3 incisors, 3 incisors. Okay, down here, right, 3 incisors, 3 incisors. If we're talking about adult incisors, capital letter I. And we're going to start at the beginning and label them from there. So 1, 2, 3, okay, 1, 2, 3. And my nomenclature here, let's say I was referring to these, okay, these bottom incisors on the lower right. Well, how would I write this? Well, I would write it as 1, 2, 3. You could technically also write it as 3, 2, 1. It doesn't matter. But I'm going to put it here in this spot next to the eye because we're referring to the lower right quadrant. Okay. Again, if I were going to refer to these incisors here, maybe I'm just going to refer to incisor 2. So it's an adult incisor, there's an I, and then a 2 in this area right here. I'm circling these for emphasis, you don't need to, but in this area here, because it's referring to the lower left incisor, so I put it lower left of the letter I. Okay. Let's say I wanted to number this one using anatomic numbering. Okay, this is an adult incisor, but now I'm in the upper left quadrant, and let's see, this is 1, 2, so this would be 3. All right, so very simple, very straightforward. Guess what we do if we have a patient that has a retained tooth, a deciduous tooth, or if we have a puppy or kitten? Well, remember for Triadin, what you see is we've got the 500 quadrant, 600, 700, 800. Well, I don't have to worry about that here. Let's say I just had a retained incisor in this third spot. It's a little teeny deciduous tooth. Okay, and this is the third, let's say, deciduous incisor. So maybe 1 and 2 fell out. There are no more puppy teeth there, but I've got this third retained deciduous incisor. How would I label this? Well, we would label this with a lowercase I. Okay, and then because it's here in this upper left quadrant, I3. Okay, same thing, let's say if I have a little retained deciduous tooth down here. Lowercase I, and now I'm in the lower left quadrant, and in this case we said it's the second deciduous tooth, so I2. So very, very straightforward when you kind of look at it this way, but again, not maybe as easy as our Triadin, a little bit easier to kind of screw up. Using the cat as an example, let's see what this would mean for molars and premolars. Well, let's say I wanted to describe this molar here using the anatomic numbering system. This on cats is the first molar. Okay. They've only got that 1 molar in the back. And dogs, you might have a second molar or third molar back here too, so we have all these options. But cats, we just have this 1 molar, so this automatically would be 1. We don't have any others behind it. So if I'm describing the upper right quadrant and it's an adult molar, we don't have deciduous molars in cats. Capital letter M, and since I'm in the upper right, okay, it goes up here because This would be the upper right quadrant, right? So don't confuse yourself about this. Again, it's not too terrible. We just have to stop and think about it a little bit there. And if you ever have a question about it, draw it out like this. Okay, remember, with the mouth facing towards you, and that'll help you a lot. The only special thing about this system is kind of the same as we talked about with Triadin for cats. We are missing premolars here, right? There's no 105 on the top, okay, in cats. 205, nothing. And down on the lower jaw, we don't have, okay, 405, we don't have 406 at all for our premolars either. Okay, we don't have 305 or 306. So when I label my premolars, this system still assumes that those teeth should be there, kind of like we assume that 405 and 406 should be there, even though cats don't have them. They are present for dogs and for other animals. So we're still going to kind of pretend to count them. So if I want to label the premolar in the cat, let's say I want to label these lower right premolars, so I'm going to put some number here in the lower right. So that's the quadrant I'm talking about. And you might see PM, you might just see P. Okay, either one's okay for this system here. But let's say I want to label premolars. We would assume this was the first premolar, this was the second, even though they're absent, and this would be the third and the fourth premolar. So if I were referring to this tooth, okay, 407, in my lower right quadrant here, this would be premolar 3. And I'd put the number here to reflect which quadrant the tooth is in. Let's look at the top here. So in this case, we have 105 missing, even though it should be there. So that we would technically count as the first premolar, even though it isn't there. And we have our second, our third, and our fourth premolar. So if I wanted to label this premolar, okay, I have my P, and then since I'm in the upper right quadrant here, this would be P2. And I don't really have a P1, okay, because that's missing, just like I don't have a 105. So down here, I don't have a P1 or P2, or, you know, I wouldn't here, there's no such thing as my P1 or P2, because these are missing on the cat, just like 305 and 306 are missing. So that's the main thing that's a little bit easy to get confused about. But again, it's the same as Triadin, the same teeth are missing, so you don't overly think this out.